I don't usually tell this story. In fact, for years, I tried to convince myself it never happened at all. But some nights, usually when the air turns cold and the trees outside my window begin to creak in the wind, I swear I still hear her voice calling my name. This happened a few years ago, when I had just moved out to the countryside of West Virginia, far away from the busy streets of Chicago where I grew up. I wanted peace, a slower pace of life, a chance to escape the noise. The place I found seemed perfect, a 2-story farmhouse sitting on 5 acres of land right beside a small river called Hollow Creek. The real estate agent had been oddly eager to close the deal. I remember she barely looked me in the eye when I asked about the property's history. Just a quick, tight smile and, "It's an old place, lots of history. You'll love it here." At first, I did. The house had this rustic charm, white paint peeling from the wood siding, a wide porch that overlooked the creek, and an attic filled with dusty trunks and yellowed newspapers from decades past. Every evening, the sun would sink behind the Appalachian hills, and the entire valley would be painted in shades of blood red and gold. It felt timeless. But the nights were different. The first week I slept there, I started waking up at 3:15 a.m. Not 3:10, not 3:20, always exactly 3:15. I jolt awake, heart pounding, with the strange sense that someone was in the room with me. I'd scan the corners, but the shadows never shifted. Everything looked ordinary, except for one thing: the silence. It wasn't just quiet, it was wrong. No crickets, no owls, not even the rush of water from the creek. Just a heavy, suffocating stillness. One night, I got out of bed and walked to the window. The moon was hanging low over the trees, fat and pale, and the creek shimmered like liquid mercury. That's when I saw it. Someone standing by the edge of the water. At first I thought it might be a neighbor, but the figure was too still, too rigid. A woman, wearing something long and white, her hair hanging loose over her shoulders. She didn't move, didn't even seem to breathe, just stood there, staring at the house. I blinked, and she was gone. I told myself I was overtired, stress, adjustment, maybe too much whiskey before bed. But deep down, a pit was forming in my stomach. Something wasn't right. The next day, I mentioned it to an old man at the general store in town. He gave me this long, wary look and said, "You're living out by Hollow Creek, ain't you? That land's got stories." When I pressed him, he shook his head and muttered, "Some things best left alone." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the figure by the water. I stayed up late, reading by lamplight in the living room. Around midnight, I heard something upstairs. A dragging sound, slow and deliberate, like someone moving heavy furniture across the floor. My heart leapt. I grabbed the fireplace poker and crept up the stairs, every step groaning beneath my weight. The sound stopped when I reached the landing. The hallway stretched ahead, dark and narrow. My bedroom door was open, though I knew I'd left it closed, and at the far end of the hall, the attic door stood ajar, blackness yawning beyond. I forced myself to look. There, on the wooden floorboards just outside the attic, were long, dark streaks, like something had been dragged across the wood. I didn't sleep that night. The following morning, I went up into the attic with the daylight streaming in through the windows. Dust motes swirled in the air. Old trunks and boxes sat stacked against the walls. Nothing seemed out of place until I noticed one trunk pushed into the center of the floor. It was locked with a rusted latch. Curiosity got the better of me, so I fetched a screwdriver and pried it open. Inside, wrapped in yellowed sheets, were photographs, hundreds of them. They were old black and white portraits, all of the same young woman. Pale face, hollow eyes, long hair. In each photo, she wore the same expressionless stare. But as I flipped through them, I realized something chilling. Her background changed. The first few photos showed her standing in front of the farmhouse when it was new, paint still fresh, curtains neat in the windows. Then there were photos of her by the creek, then in the hallway, then the attic, and then photos of her in the bedroom I was sleeping in. My stomach dropped. I shoved the photos back inside the trunk and slammed it shut, my hands trembling. That night, I locked my bedroom door and left every light in the house on. Still, at exactly 3:15, I woke up. My throat was dry, my skin clammy. The silence was back. And then, from the corner of the room, came the sound of breathing. It was slow, heavy, wet almost. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. My eyes darted toward the corner, and that's when I saw her. The woman from the creek. She was crouched there, her limbs twisted, her long hair hanging like a curtain over her face. Her skin was gray, stretched too tightly across her bones. She was smiling, and she whispered my name. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I couldn't. I lay there, paralyzed, my eyes locked on that corner of the room where I had seen her, the woman. My mind kept trying to rationalize it, a trick of the light, a nightmare bleeding into waking reality, sleep paralysis. That's what I told myself, over and over, like a mantra. But it didn't explain the way she whispered my name, the way her smile had stretched far too wide, too human, and yet not human at all. By the time dawn finally broke, my sheets were damp with sweat. I stumbled downstairs, shaking, poured myself coffee with trembling hands, and sat staring at the kitchen wall for hours. I told myself I was done. I couldn't stay there another night. But when I went into town to look for temporary lodging, every motel was either full or far too expensive. I didn't have the money to just pack up and leave. Besides, a stubborn part of me hated the idea of being chased out of my own house. It was mine now. I had signed the deed, paid for the land. Whatever this was, I wasn't about to let it win. Still, I needed answers. That afternoon, I went back to the general store. The same old man was there, stocking shelves. When he saw me, his face tightened. "You saw her, didn't you?" he said quietly. My blood ran cold. "Who?" He set down a jar of pickles and leaned against the shelf. "The woman. Folks around here call her Clara, but some say that ain't her real name. She's been seen by Hollow Creek for as long as anyone remembers." I swallowed hard. "What's her story?" The man shook his head. "Depends who you ask. Some say she drowned in the creek 100 years ago. Some say she was murdered in that very house. And some say she was never human at all, just something the land gave shape to." He lowered his voice. "Whatever she is, once she sets her eyes on you, she don't let go." The weight of his words sat heavy in my chest. When I pressed him for more, he just muttered, "Best thing you can do is leave. Hollow Creek don't forget it's dead." I drove back home with my heart pounding, the country roads twisting like veins through the hills. The house loomed in the distance, white paint peeling like dead skin. For the first time since moving in, I didn't feel like it belonged to me. It felt like I had trespassed. That night, I tried to stay awake. I left the TV on, sat curled up on the couch with a blanket, sipping coffee until my hands jittered. Midnight passed, then 1, then 2. By 3 o'clock, my eyelids felt like lead. I must have dozed off because when I snapped awake, the screen was static, hissing loud in the dark, and every light in the house was off. My chest tightened. I remembered clearly leaving them on. I grabbed the flashlight from the coffee table and clicked it on. The beam illuminated the hallway. The air felt thicker than before, damp and cold. My breath fogged in the beam of the light. And then I heard it, scraping, upstairs. That dragging sound again. I forced myself to climb the stairs, each step slower than the last. The flashlight beam trembled in my hand. When I reached the landing, my stomach dropped. The attic door was wide open. Something inside shifted, and I nearly bolted right then, but some force, morbid curiosity maybe, pulled me forward. I raised the flashlight and stepped inside. The attic was colder than the rest of the house, and the smell hit me immediately. Damp earth, mildew, and something metallic, like rust, blood. The trunks and boxes looked the same as before, except one. The trunk with the photographs. It wasn't in the center of the room anymore. It was sitting open against the far wall as if someone had been going through them. I kneeled down, heart hammering, and picked up a photograph lying face up on the floor. It wasn't old and yellowed like the others. It was new, glossy, crisp. It was a photograph of me, lying in bed, asleep. The photo slipped from my fingers and landed softly on the floorboards. My mouth dried, and then I heard it, right behind me. Breathing, slow, heavy, wet. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the dark, and caught a glimpse of her. Just a flash, hair hanging in her face, eyes hollow, mouth twisted in that awful smile. She was inches away. I bolted. I didn't stop to think, didn't even breathe until I was outside, barefoot in the cold grass, the creek glinting in the moonlight. My flashlight beam shook wildly across the yard. The house loomed behind me, every window black. And then I saw her again. She was standing at the window of my bedroom, her pale face pressed against the glass from the inside, watching me. I didn't go back inside until dawn. I sat on the porch swing all night, wrapped in a blanket, shivering, eyes fixed on that dark window. When the sun finally rose, I gathered my things and drove into town again. This time I went to the library. I needed to know what the hell was happening in that house. The local history section was dusty and neglected, but I found a box of old newspapers, brittle with age. I spent hours combing through them until one headline made my stomach twist. Young woman found dead in Hollow Creek, 1924. The article described a girl named Clara Whitmore, 20 years old, who was discovered floating face down in the water. Officially, it was ruled an accident, but there were whispers of foul play. Neighbors reported screams in the night, lights in the windows of the farmhouse, strange voices echoing by the creek. But the most disturbing part was a single line near the end. Several residents have claimed to see a pale young woman wandering the property at night. Officials dismissed these accounts as hysteria. I snapped the folder shut, my pulse racing. The pieces were fitting together, and I didn't like the picture they formed. When I got back to the farmhouse, I swore I wouldn't stay another night. I packed a duffel bag, stuffed it with clothes and essentials, ready to check into the next town over. But as I was zipping it up, I froze. From upstairs came the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. But I hadn't been upstairs since dawn, and I was alone. I stood in the living room, clutching the bag, listening. The footsteps crossed the bedroom floor, then they stopped. Silence. I backed towards the door, keys clutched in my hand, but then 3 soft knocks from inside the bedroom. Knock, knock, knock. My blood turned to ice, and then a voice. Low, raspy, stretched like it came from a throat full of water. Don't leave me. The voice froze me where I stood. Don't leave me. It was soft, almost pleading, but underneath the words was something darker, like nails scraping the underside of my skin. Every instinct screamed at me to run, yet my legs felt rooted to the floor. I forced myself to whisper, "Who are you?" No answer, just silence. And then the door at the top of the stairs creaked open on its own. The air seemed to shift, growing heavier, thicker, as if the whole house was holding its breath. I tightened my grip on the flashlight, and against every shred of reason I had left, I began to climb the stairs. Each step groaned like a warning. The door to my bedroom stood open, the darkness inside absolute. I raised the flashlight. The beam caught the mirror across from the bed, and my blood turned cold. Because in that mirror, I saw myself, standing in the doorway, flashlight shaking. But behind my reflection, she was there, Clara. Her face hovered just inches above my shoulder in the reflection, her mouth stretching wider, wider, impossibly wide, until it split into a grin that seemed carved into her flesh. Her eyes were empty sockets, yet I felt her stare boring into me. I spun around, flashlight beams slicing through the dark. The room was empty. But when I looked back at the mirror, she was still there, closer. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the edge of the bed. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging the room into blackness. And then something cold brushed the back of my neck. I bolted. I don't even remember how I got down the stairs, only that by the time I reached the living room, I was gasping, clutching at my chest as though I could rip the fear out of me. The house seemed to hum with an energy I couldn't escape. I grabbed my keys, my bag, and yanked open the front door, only to freeze again. She was standing in the yard. The moonlight bathed her in silver, her white tress rippling in a wind I couldn't feel. Her head tilted at an unnatural angle, long hair swaying like it was underwater. She lifted one arm, slow, deliberate, and pointed back toward the house. "No," I whispered. "No, I'm done." But when I tried to step past her, I couldn't. My body refused to move forward, as though invisible chains held me in place. My chest tightened, my vision blurred, and then her voice again, right in my ear, though her lips never moved. "You can't leave. You're mine now." The world went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor of the living room. Morning light streamed through the windows, soft and golden, as if none of it had happened. My bag was still packed by the door. My keys were in my hand, but my skin was ice cold, and when I looked down, there were damp handprints across my arms and chest, small, feminine, like she had been holding me down. I didn't know what else to do, so I went back into town, desperate for answers. At the library, I asked about Clara Whitmore. The librarian, a frail woman with sharp eyes, hesitated before finally saying, "You should talk to Reverend Harker. He's the only one who will speak openly about the Whitmore girl." She gave me an address on the outskirts of town. The Reverend lived in a small, sagging house beside a graveyard. He was old, his face deeply lined, his eyes tired. When I told him I had moved into the farmhouse by Hollow Creek, his expression hardened. "You've seen her," he said flatly. It wasn't a question. I nodded, unable to speak. He sighed, rubbed his temples. Clara Whitmore was troubled. They say her father kept her locked in that house, forbade her from seeing anyone. Some claim he did things, dark things. One night she tried to escape. They found her in the creek the next morning, broken, drowned. His gaze fixed on me, but she never left. The land held on to her pain, and now she's looking for someone. Someone? I managed. A replacement. The word hit me like a blade. I wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as superstition, but the memory of her handprints on my skin silenced every rational thought. The Reverend leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Once she marks you, she won't stop. She'll drag you back to the creek if she has to. You can't fight her with locks or lights. You need to sever her hold." "How?" I demanded. He hesitated, then said, "You'll need to go back to where it began, to her grave." That night, armed with a shovel, I found myself standing in Hollow Creek Cemetery. The gravestones leaned crooked in the damp earth, names worn smooth by time. The moon was high, casting everything in pale silver. I found her headstone near the back, cracked down the middle. The name was faint, but I could just make it out. Clara Whitmore, 1904 to 1924. I didn't know what I expected. Closure, maybe? Some sense of control? Instead, standing there, the silence pressed against me like a weight. And then the ground beneath the grave shifted. The soil rippled, like something moving underneath. I staggered back, my shovel clattering to the ground. A hand broke through the dirt, pale, thin, clawing toward the sky. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The earth split open, and she began to crawl out. Her face was bloated, waterlogged, her hair dripping as though she had just been pulled from the creek. Mud and worms clung to her dress. Her empty eyes locked on mine, and her mouth split into that impossible grin. "You came back. You came for me," she gurgled. I turned and ran. Branches whipped against my face as I tore through the graveyard, her laughter echoing behind me, wet, broken, inhuman. When I burst back into the farmhouse, I slammed the door and collapsed against it, chest heaving. For the first time, I realized there was no escape. No matter how far I ran, she would follow. And as the clock struck 3:15, the lights flickered out again. From the darkness above came the sound of dragging footsteps. she was inside.
I could hear her moving inside the house. The dragging footsteps creaked across the upstairs floorboards, slow and deliberate, like she wanted me to know she was there. My throat tightened, and I pressed my back harder against the door, praying it would hold. But then I realized the truth. She didn't need doors. The air around me thickened, heavy as wet sand. My vision blurred, and from the shadows at the top of the stairs, her voice slithered down toward me. "Why are you running, love? Don't you know you belong here with me?" I stumbled backward, clutching the fireplace poker like it could protect me. The silence between her words was worse than the words themselves, stretching long, suffocating, until the only sound I could hear was my own pulse hammering in my ears. I forced myself to speak, but my voice cracked. "What do you want from me?" Her laughter poured through the house, not loud, but everywhere. It vibrated through the walls, the floorboards, even my bones. Then came her answer. "I want you to stay." I didn't sleep at all that night. By the time the pale light of dawn seeped into the windows, I was sitting in the corner of the living room, trembling, the poker still in my hands. I knew I couldn't keep this up. If I didn't do something, she would break me, or worse, take me. The Reverend's words echoed in my mind. "You need to sever her hold." So I went back, not to the graveyard, not yet. I went back to the attic. The trunk still sat open where I had left it. My stomach churned as I rifled through the photographs again. The older ones showed Clara in front of the farmhouse, the creek, the windows. Then came the ones inside the house, the hallway, the attic, the bedroom. And then a new stack, photographs of me, sleeping, eating breakfast, reading by lampland, standing at the window. Dozens of them, each taken from angles that suggested she had been in the room with me. My skin crawled as I flipped through them. At the bottom of the stack was one last photo. My breath caught in my throat. It was me, lying in the creek, eyes closed, mouth slightly open, skin pale, water rippling around my body. The date printed at the bottom corner wasn't from the past. It was tomorrow. I don't remember dropping the photos, but suddenly they were scattered across the floor. My chest tightened as panic surged through me. She wasn't just haunting me, she was showing me my fate. That night, I decided I couldn't face her alone anymore. I called Reverend Harker. My hands shook as I dialed, but when his tired voice answered, a wave of relief washed over me. I told him everything, the photos, the graveyard, the voice in the house. He was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "It's worse than I thought. She's not just tied to the land. She's tethered to you now. She's chosen you." "Chosen me for what?" I asked, voice breaking. His reply was almost a whisper. "To finish what was done to her. To drag you down into the water so you can join her." I swallowed hard. "What can I do?" He hesitated, then said, "You'll need to confront her. Not run, not hide. Confront her where she died, at the creek. If you can face her there and refuse her, maybe you can break her hold." The thought made my blood run cold. The creek at night was terrifying enough without her, but I was out of options. That evening, as the sun bled into the hills, I walked down to Hollow Creek. The water shimmered darkly, reflecting the first pale stars. The trees stood like silent sentinels on either side, their branches clawing at the sky. I stood at the bank, heart hammering. "Clara," I called, my voice shaking. "If you want me, here I am." For a long moment, nothing, just the gurgle of water over rocks. And then she rose. Her head broke the surface first, hair slick and dripping, clinging to her face. Then her shoulders, her arms, her pale dress swirling around her in the current. She stood in the water as though it held her, her eyes empty voids locked onto mine. "You came," she whispered. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to stay. "What do you want from me?" Her grin widened. "To be whole again." She lifted her arms, and the water surged up like hands reaching for me. I stumbled back, but the ground turned slick, pulling me toward her. The air grew colder, sharper, until every breath felt like glass in my lungs. "Stay with me," she hissed, "forever." The water wrapped around my ankles, icy, tugging hard. My heart thundered as I fought to pull free, but the current was stronger than any river had a right to be. I fell to my knees, the mud sucking at my legs. And then I felt her hand, cold, slimy, fingers like iron wrap around my wrist. I screamed, but before the darkness could pull me under, a voice rang out behind me. "Let him go!" It was Reverend Harker. He stood at the edge of the creek, clutching a worn Bible, his voice booming as he read words I didn't understand. Latin, maybe. His voice cut through the night like a blade. Clara shrieked, the sound inhuman, a howl that rattled the trees. The water thrashed, releasing me. I scrambled backward onto the bank, coughing, shivering, my chest heaving. When I looked up, she was gone. The creek rippled, innocent, as though nothing had happened. But I knew better. This wasn't over. Not even close. For 2 days after that night at the creek, the house was silent. I almost convinced myself it was over. Reverend Harker had faced her, shouted those strange words into the night, and Clara had disappeared. Maybe he had broken the tether. Maybe I was free. But deep down, I didn't believe it. The silence didn't feel like safety. It felt like waiting. On the third night, it began again. I was sitting in the kitchen, trying to eat something, anything, though my stomach turned at every bite. The clock ticked loud on the wall, dragging closer to midnight. The air felt heavy, pressing against my chest. Then the lights flickered. My fork clattered against the plate as every bulb in the house dimmed, then died. The silence that followed was thick, absolute, and then came the sound. Not the dragging footsteps this time, not the laughter. It was humming. A woman's voice, soft and lilting, drifting through the air like smoke. The tune was unfamiliar, but something in it twisted my insides. It wasn't a lullaby, it wasn't soothing. It was the kind of song sung to the dead. I forced myself to move, grabbing the flashlight and sweeping it across the kitchen. The beam caught nothing but shadows, long and shifting, bending in ways they shouldn't. The humming grew louder, filling the walls, vibrating in the pipes, and then, faintly, I heard words woven into the tune. "Come to the water. Come and see the place where you belong with me." My skin crawled. I stumbled back into the living room, heart pounding. My eyes caught the mirror above the fireplace, and my stomach dropped. The reflection wasn't me. It was Clara. She stood in my place, her pale face cracked, her eyes two endless holes, Water streamed from her mouth as she grinned, her head tilting too far to one side. Her lips moved, but the sound came from everywhere at once. "You can't run." The glass splintered with a deafening crack. Shards exploded across the floor, and in the jagged pieces at my feet, I saw her face in every fragment, screaming silently. That was when the phone rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The sound was so ordinary, so normal, it almost broke the spell. I snatched the receiver with trembling hands. "Hello?" "It's Harker," he came. "She's back, isn't she?" I couldn't even form words. I just breathed into the line. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "She's growing stronger. Every time you see her, every time you hear her, you feed her. She wants your fear. It binds you to her. If we don't end this, she'll take you." "How?" I croaked. "There's a ritual," he said. "Old, dangerous, but it might be the only way to sever her completely." The way he said "might" sent a chill through me. "What do I have to do?" "You'll need something that belonged to her," he said. "Something personal, clothing, hair, a possession. It must be burned at the creek, and while it burns, you must speak the words I give you." My mind flashed to the attic, the photographs, the trunk. "I think I already have it," I whispered. That night I returned to the attic. Every instinct screamed at me not to go, but I forced myself up the stairs, each creak of the floorboards echoing like thunder. The trunk sat in the center of the room, waiting. I opened it slowly, my flashlight beam trembling across its contents. The photos were there, but beneath them, wrapped in yellowed cloth, I found something else. A dress, white, delicate, though stained with water and dirt. The moment I touched it, the air shifted. The attic groaned, and from the far corner, the shadows stirred. I froze. She was there. Clara, crouched low, her hair veiling her face, her hands clutching the floorboards. She moved on all fours, her limbs jerking unnaturally, like a marionette, and as my flashlight caught her face, I saw her mouth stretched open wider than humanly possible, a black void spilling water onto the wood. She hissed. I grabbed the dress and bolted. Her scream followed me down the stairs, rattling the windows, shaking the walls. The front door slammed shut in my face, and for a moment I thought I was trapped. But then the lights flickered and the latch gave way. I burst into the night, gasping, clutching the dress to my chest. At the creek, Reverend Harker was waiting. He had drawn strange symbols in the dirt with chalk, candles burning at each point. His Bible lay open on a stone, the pages fluttering though there was no wind. "You have it?" he asked. I held up the dress, my hands trembling. "Yes." "Good," he said, though his eyes betrayed fear. "Put it in the fire." I tossed the dress onto the flames. It curled and blackened, smoke rising thick and acrid into the night. The creek hissed as if protesting. "Now repeat after me," Harker commanded, his voice firm. He began to chant, guttural words that scraped the air. I stumbled through them, my tongue clumsy, the sounds alien. The fire roared higher, the water thrashing violently, and then Clara rose from the creek, not slowly this time, not half-formed, all at once. Her body erupted from the water, tall and looming, her hair a writhing mass around her face, her eyes burned with hollow light, her mouth twisting as she shrieked, "Mine! Mine!" The fire flickered, the ground shook, Harker's voice faltered for the first time. "Keep going," he shouted, but I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Clara's voice filled my skull, drowning out his words. She stepped closer, water dripping from her hands, each drop sizzling on the earth. She hissed. The fire sputtered, the dress crumbled to ash, and then the wind died. The night fell silent. She was gone. For a moment, relief surged through me. Maybe it had worked. Maybe we had beaten her. But when I turned to Harker, his face was pale, his eyes wide with horror. "No," he whispered. "It's worse. She's not gone. She's inside." "Inside what?" I asked. His gaze shifted to me. "Inside you."
Reverend Harker's words wouldn't leave me. "She's inside you." They looped in my head all night, louder than my own heartbeat. I sat in the living room until sunrise, staring at the broken mirror shards on the floor. Every time my eyes slipped to a fragment of glass, I didn't see myself. I saw her, Clara, her pale face stretching over mine like wet paper, her lips mouthing things I couldn't hear. Sometimes she smiled. Sometimes she screamed silently, her mouth gaping wider than humanly possible. And the worst part? I could feel her smile tugging at my cheeks, even when my own mouth stayed still. Harker paced back and forth, muttering prayers I didn't recognize. He was sweating despite the cold. Finally, he stopped, looking older than ever. "We don't have long," he said. "Every hour she spends inside you, she roots deeper. Soon you won't be you anymore." I laughed. At least I thought I did. The sound that came out of me was soft, lilting, a woman's laugh. My hand shot to my throat. "That wasn't me." Harker clenched his jaw. "It's beginning." I staggered toward the kitchen sink, splashed water on my face, but the water didn't drip clear. It slid down thick, dark, like creek water, muddy, rotten. I gagged, clutching the sink, my reflection swimming in the basin. My lips moved on their own. "Come back to the water." "No!" I slammed my head back, breaking the trance. My pulse thundered. Harker grabbed my shoulder, steadying me. "We have one chance left, tonight. If we fail..." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. By nightfall, he had prepared the ritual. Candles in every corner of the room, strange symbols chalked onto the floor, an iron bowl filled with herbs that smelled sharp and bitter. I sat cross-legged at the center, trembling, while he circled me with salt. "You must not break the circle, no matter what you see, no matter what she says." I nodded, though my insides quaked. He began chanting, low and guttural. The language was old, harsh. The sound of it made my teeth ache. Almost instantly, the temperature dropped. Frost bloomed across the windows. My breath fogged the air. And then, she laughed. It came from my mouth, but it wasn't mine. It was Clara's laugh, bubbling and cruel. My chest convulsed, as if she was pulling my lungs like puppet strings. Harker's voice grew louder. The bowl of herbs caught fire, green flames licking the air. I doubled over, clutching my stomach. Something moved inside me, like hands pressing against my ribs from within. "Get out of me!" I screamed, but half the words came in her voice, layered over mine. Shadows swirled at the edges of the room. Figures formed in the corners. Women, dozens of them, their faces pale and blurred. They wept. They reached, their hands stretching for me. "The drowned," Harker shouted over the noise. "The one she's claimed." Their cries pierced my skull. I wanted to cover my ears, but my arms wouldn't obey. My hands twitched,
my fingers jerking like broken twigs. Clara was testing her control. The salt circle hissed, the line beginning to smudge. Harker dropped to his knees, voice breaking with strain. "Fight her," he roared. "You must fight!" I closed my eyes, searching for something, anything inside myself. But Clara was everywhere. Her laughter, her whispers, her memories bleeding into mine. I saw flashes, a girl running through the woods, gasping for breath, rough hands grabbing her, a scream cut short by water closing overhead. Her death. I was drowning with her. My lungs burned, my vision blackened. "No," I rasped, my voice, not hers. "You're not me." The flames roared higher, throwing sparks. The women in the corners shrieked and dissolved into mist. My body convulsed, jerking against the invisible strings pulling me apart. Clara shrieked through my throat, the sound inhuman, rattling the windows. And then, silence. I collapsed to the floor, gasping. My body felt hollow, wrung out. Harker knelt beside me, sweat dripping down his temples. "Did it work?" I croaked. He looked at me for a long time, eyes narrowed. Finally, he said, "For now." "For now?" "She's weakened, driven out, partly. But she's not gone. I could feel her clinging. She'll try to return." I didn't respond, couldn't, because even in that moment of calm, I felt it, faint but undeniable. The trickle of cold water beneath my skin and the whisper in the back of my mind. Soon. Reverend Harker kept saying it. Clara was weakened, driven out, at least partly, but I knew the truth. She wasn't gone. Even as I sat trembling in the circle of extinguished candles, I could feel her, faint but steady, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine, thumping inside my chest, and with every passing hour, it grew stronger. 3 nights later, the dreams began. I woke gasping, lungs filled with creek water, bed sheets soaked through. I dreamed of drowning over and over, sinking into black water while pale hands pulled me down. But the worst part wasn't the drowning, it was that I liked it. In the dream, her voice was soft, soothing. "You belong here, with me. Just let go." Every morning I clawed my way back, but the whispers followed me into daylight. Finally, on the 7th night, Harker made his decision. "There's one last way," he said, "but if we attempt it, you may not survive." I laughed bitterly. If we don't attempt it, I definitely won't. At midnight, he led me back to the creek. The water shimmered in the moonlight, calm on the surface but wrong underneath, too dark, too deep. "This place is her anchor, her grave, her prison, and now yours. If we end her here, we end her forever." I swallowed hard. "And if we fail?" His eyes flicked to the water. "Then you won't leave." The ritual began with fire again, candles in a wide circle, herbs burning on stones. Harker's voice rose, deep and booming, but this time I wasn't outside the circle. I was in the water. He ordered me to wade into the creek. The icy current climbed to my chest, breath catching. The water grew heavier, colder, and then I felt her. The current shifted. Shadows stirred. Clara rose slowly, her form rippling from the depths like a corpse uncoiling. Her hair floated, her eyes endless voids locking on me. "You've brought me home," she whispered through my lips and hers at once. The water surged, dragging me deeper. Harker's chanting grew frantic. Symbols flared on the bank. The candles sputtered. "Resist her!" he shouted. but Clara was inside me, and her voice was sweeter than his. "Don't fight. It's easier to sink, easier to belong." The water rose to my chin. My mouth opened, not to scream, but to let her in. Harker roared words I couldn't understand. The creek boiled, the ground shook, pain split me in two. She clawed her way out of me, wrenching through my skin without breaking it. I fell to my knees, coughing, as her form grew tall, more solid than ever. For the first time, she wasn't just a reflection or a whisper. She was real, and she was beautiful, terrifyingly beautiful. Her wet dress clung, her cracked face gleamed, her eyes endless pits. She smiled and reached a hand toward me. "You're mine." Harker charged into the water with a crucifix, shouting words that split the night. Light seared. Clara shrieked, lunged at him. The crucifix burned her skin, but she didn't let go. The creek exploded in chaos, water thrashing, wind tearing the candles out. She wasn't attacking him, she was pulling me. Her hands reached through the air, through my chest, tugging my soul. I felt myself tearing apart, half clinging to the world, half sliding into her abyss. Harker's voice broke, the crucifix dimmed. I looked into her eyes and saw eternity, dark water, endless drowning, 1,000 voices screaming below, and me floating among them. I should have fought, but I didn't. I let go. The last thing I remember is Harker's scream, then silence. I don't know how much time has passed. I'm writing this in a place that isn't mine. The air is cold, wet. I hear dripping water always. When I look down, my hands aren't always mine. Sometimes they're pale, cracked. Sometimes they belong to her. I don't feel afraid anymore, because Clara was right. The water isn't a prison, it's a home. And now, when I look into the surface of the creek, I don't see her face anymore. I see mine, smiling, waiting.